Hello, 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 my beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of The Auntie Lynette Show, where we showcase some of Toronto's hottest musical and visual artists. Today's episode is brought to you by a WWB production and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Spreaker.com. I am your host, LWB, and today, folks, it gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce you all to Anthony Ricciardi. Anthony is a renowned multi-disciplinary artist from Toronto, Canada, that has traveled internationally showcasing his artwork and murals. His collections have been showcased globally in major cities such as New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Manchester, Puerto Rico, Antigua, Montreal, and Sao Paolo, Brazil. He has curated large-scale artwork and clothing for notable celebrities such as Demi Lovato, Bad Bunny, Post Malone, Shaq, and many more. Anthony has also collaborated with major brands such as Disney, Adidas, Coors Light, and L'Oreal. Anthony is more than just an artist, and his story, folks, isn't your typical. He went to Alabama State University on a baseball scholarship and spent 5 years working as an analyst for an investment fund, but decided to leave the comfort and clout of corporate finance to pursue his true passion, art. So welcome,
Thank
Anthony.
You.
Oh my goodness.
Very grateful to be here. Thank you.
It is so wonderful to have you. You know, I didn't want to give it away before you walked in the studio today and tell you that I've been a fan of your work for years, before meeting you on social and before meeting you today here in person. For this particular episode of this podcast, I really want to bring to the audience what I feel from you outside of your work, which is that you're so inspirational. Your cup is always half full. Yeah. You live and walk the walk and you talk the talk. You have a through line in all of your messages, which is about perseverance. And I'd love you to share with the people how your art and your family and your messaging of uplifting your audience, what is that about for you? Where did it come from? If you would just start there, to me, I think that that's what I would love to ask right off the hop.
Thank you. That's awesome. And that's my goal, truly. So I'm happy that it translates that way outward. For me, artwork has always been, growing up, no one really said become an artist is a viable career. The truth is it wasn't. And for me, coming from a place of gratefulness that I can do this on a daily basis, it makes me look at the world very, very differently, because I had to go through so many different things to eventually become an artist that I understand what it actually took for me to take that leap into the creative field. Anything creative, music, art, acting, anything in that creative realm always comes with a little bit of societal norms that are really? Are you sure? You're going to leave a career in finance? You're going to leave structure to do this? So when I look back at that, a common theme in all of my paintings is a heart motif and following your hearts, because I believe that, especially coming from a career in finance where at a young age I was making decent amount of money, whereas I'm going to leave that to actually be happy. And a lot of people ask me, oh, were you miserable at your job, or did you work with bad people? I'm like, no, it wasn't that. It's just that now I'm truly happy. So a lot of times we fall into this comfort level of okay, well, I'm going to get a paycheck and it's all good. Mm-hmm. But you don't actually realize your day to day, we're only here on this beautiful planet for a finite amount of time, whether it's 100 years or 110,
exactly.
It's still pretty short. I do realize that. And because I was able to realize that at a young age, I was able to say, you know what, let's leave this career and move into the structure of artwork and do what I truly love every day. And with that, my family, my wife and now son, my wife works with me, and it's the biggest blessing in the world because we get to do everything that we love together every day. So I'm constantly ingrained, and it just doesn't feel like work.
I love it.
And that's been the biggest thing for me.
I love it. And as you say, it really does resonate. And, what an inspiration for your son to see his parents be happy. That's apparently the biggest gift we give our children, is to be
100%,
happy.
100%.
So I love everything that you just said. It's hard to ignore the international sports, entertainment, and political figures that come up in your work. So tell me how pop culture influences that, because I get the heart connection.
Yeah.
That is very palpable. I mean, it's always there. I lead by the heart, so that's probably why your work resonated with me as a human being. But past that, I also see this heavily influenced pop influence. So tell me what that's about.
I think early on, especially early in my career, I was looking for references of things that I liked. My uncle was an artist growing up, and he was a big inspiration to me, and he did a lot of different things. Unfortunately, when I was away at university, he passed away, but after that, when I took his poetry and I started translating into artwork, and then when I started to look and expand into people that had to go through things to become things, that's what we'll say. So whatever the definition of success for me at the time was when I was doing those paintings, whether it was freedom, whether it was monetary, whether it was influence and impact on the world, I would reference different people, whoever it may be, whether it was a musician like Frank Sinatra to Post Malone, to an athlete, to an actor. I would look at what they had to go through, because what you start noticing when you're studying a lot of these people is that there's a very common thread to, like, they had to go through a lot and they had to do a lot to achieve where they're at today. And when I started realizing that and connecting those dots, I was like, this person inspires me, this person inspired me. So they really started, because you have to remember, like 5-6 years ago when people weren't buying my art, I was making this stuff for myself.
Sure.
And I wanted to be inspired and look at people that inspired me and create paintings based on them and their life story. And everyone has very diverse backgrounds, so there's always a positive and negative to everyone. But I would take the positive quote or the imagery that really resonated with me and turn it into a unique piece of art.
That's right. So you know Simu, right? The lead of Shang-Chi, right?
Yes.
He's Canadian as well. He also came from finance and Deloitte.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
He literally, to the release of his film, was 10 years to the day from when he left Deloitte. So check him out, read up on, some of the things he's been saying. And he's an actor, so, I know him from the circuit. But we're all so proud of him for the same exact reasons that you're saying. I mean, that's the through line for any artist. And so let's jump into the actual process. Like, I understand you were born colorblind.
Yes.
So what I have read in my research is that there's 3 types of colorblindness, and that the more extreme case of the condition applies to those who can only see in black and white. So tell me about where you are.
The color deficiency that I have allows me not to see shades. So brown and green look exactly the same. Blue and purple look exactly the same. Brown and red look the same. So what happens is when colors are beside each other, I can't tell the difference. If you tell me something's purple, so the only reference, just because I've been this way my whole life, all my uncles are this way, it's just a family trait.
Okay.
But if I see like a shade of blue and if it's dark, I would think it's purple. If I see a shade of purple and I think it's light, I would think it's blue, just because like my reference is like lighter is usually blue, darker is usually purple.
I see.
So, but if something's separated, like if you give me red on its own, you say this is red, I can see the red. But if you put green or brown beside it, I can't tell the difference. So in my process, what happens is, over time I've learned this because of a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
What happens is blending becomes an issue. And a lot of my paintings are very thick in texture because I have to wait for every single color to dry. When I was younger and I would try to like make a painting, I guess, fast or try to rush something, the colors would blend. I would have blue in the left corner and green in the right corner. All of a sudden it would become muddy brown.
Really?
And I wouldn't see it change because I read the bottle, it said blue. I read the bottle, it said green. And then all of a sudden when they blend, I don't see the blend happen. And that's what a lot of paintings in my early days were like muddy brown or like, and my wife would be like, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she'd be like, we were very young, and she was like, did you mean to make the sky that color? I'm like, yeah. She's like, it doesn't look great. She's like, the painting's great, but that color does not work. I was like, okay, it's not great. So I had to learn a process where every layer has to dry. And that's how it works.
So interesting to me, because when I look at your work, that's what I'm drawn to, the color. I love the palettes of how much they pop and like all of the way that you blend. As you said, that word blend stands out to me, because if anything, that's the one thing I get from your work is that you blend
so layering.
Proficiently.
Just because of the layering process, I make it every color has to fully dry before I add the next one.
I see.
So it's been a unique way that I've been able to do things.
I see. And then the other day I noticed that you kind of like, painted over something you didn't like because it was not appealing. So that happens a lot too, huh?
Wow. My process, like I'm constantly working on like between 10 to 15 paintings at a time. Really? Whether they're all going to a client or one of my galleries, whatever it may be, I'm always just working on pieces. So there's often time where I'm working on a piece that I think is going to go one way, and then it goes another way, and I'm finally like, nah, I'm just going to paint over it.
I love that.
And then I start again. You can't go wrong in art, right?
I love that.
It's all a process.
That's very Pollock, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of your murals, "What the F is a Pokeball?" cracked me up.
That was
because I'm like, this dude is funny as well as inspirational. So tell us about how that piece came to be. I just want to hear that story.
That was a really fun story. That was a project in New Jersey. These 2 clients reached out to them. They're friends now, and they're awesome. They're opening up a poke restaurant. That mural was probably 4 years old.
Okay.
And at the time, especially in that area, New Jersey and New York, the poke restaurants weren't very popular. No one really knew what they were. So when we were brainstorming something fun to do, we're like, let's do that. Let's have a little play on what is this? It was I don't know, maybe a 60-foot mural, all graffiti. And then we had that in the center. As soon as you walk up to like order your food, you see that. So
I just thought that was great. I really appreciated that because, you got to put your own stamp in there, and the person gets to see a little bit more of what the artist is thinking and feeling behind a message like that. So good for you.
Sure.
Now, your jewelry and mentioning that your wife works with you, and of course, I can't state enough how psyched I am for your boy to be raised in a world where his parents are both working together and happy. I can't tell you how psyched I am for his future. But the jewelry that you all create is sustainably sourced with the intent to build confidence for girls and women. So as a father of a son, I wondered what was the draw there for you? Because you're specifying
such a great question. So we created a brand called Every Heart. And our partner, whose name is Tanya, she rode for Team Canada. So she grew up in sport. I grew up in sport. I played baseball in Alabama. And I saw that, especially being down south and just seeing the inequalities throughout my whole entire life of women in sport versus men in sport. So when we started to think, I do a lot of stuff with different charities, but the jewelry, especially with my heart, was going to be very women-based anyway. Just because of how the heart base is and all the jewelry that I was creating. So we were thinking about different women's charities, and Tanya being in sport, Kat, and even on the verse side, my wife Cass not being in sport, because it was just looked at like, oh, what are you going to do in sport? Like, there wasn't enough opportunity, to be totally honest. And we said, you know what, well, why don't we fund young girls? So mainly right now in Scarborough and in a bunch of different other cities that we're looking at with programs that have girls sports that are maybe inner cities or lack funding, where we've already, in our first month, we've already donated $10,000 to fund 100 different girls to play sports. So we felt like we can have a ground roots.
Bravo, we're getting a clap on that because that is really phenomenal.
We want to have a ground roots impact on girls. And the reason was because I believe that the jewelry, all heart-based, can inspire. And that was the main thing. And sports means a lot to me. Sports means a lot to my partner. And that's how the sports angle came to be. I
love that. And I would not have guessed that. That's phenomenal. I mean, as a man, to notice the inequities in female sports is huge. Yeah, it's amazing. I actually know Rosie Aday. People like her are walking the walk as you are. But for a man to do it, it's very rare. And bravo to you, honestly. Big claps there. Because you are following your heart. You are living your message through your work. And I just cannot be happier to be in your presence, because I wondered, though, the shape of the heart is very interesting. So I'd love to know how that came about, because I'm drawn to hearts and I'm drawn to constantly promoting love, but I want to know about that shape.
What ended up happening was I was doing more and more murals on a global stage, and at the end of the day, I didn't create the shape of a heart. Right. But what I was doing these big murals. Actually, that pokey one, you'll see a lot of hearts in there, but it's not the new shape that I'm working with. What ended up happening was, at the end of the day, there's other artists that do hearts. And I understand that. I didn't create the shape. Right. So I was like, well, as I continue to do bigger murals and on a global stage, I want to have a recognizable heart. And that's what it really came down to be, is I wanted to create my own. And about 3 Valentines ago, I created this sculpture. And that's how it all started, is I wanted to create a sculpture. So I molded this sculpture. And that's just how it was molded off of a dripping heart. And that's how it came to be. So then I took that heart and then just ran with it for everything that I do.
It's so catchy. And as you say, it's so definitively yours. And when I see it, I'm like, that's Ricciardi's. Yeah, I love that. So in general, you talk about inspiring people. You talk about inspiring a generation of others to be aware and mindful of, gender inequalities. Yeah. You were in Alabama. I can only imagine. I'm American. I'm a black woman from New York, but my grandmother was from the South. I can only imagine what you've seen.
I went to a historically black school, so it was.
You went to an HBCU.
It was HBCU.
That's right.
Yeah, I would say it was an HBCU.
There you go.
Yeah, and I definitely saw that side of the world as well.
So you saw that as well. I love that you had that experience, and I'm sure it informs your work. So how important is art to shaping societal issues?
I think it's very important. And, I don't touch too much on the political side of things with my artwork. It sounds cliche, but I just try to be positive all the time.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of artists, and I know them, and I respect all the different arts and creatives that push the boundaries to get a reaction one way or another. But my goal is to have only a positive one. Mm-hmm. So I think art has the ability to change and help in society by creating imagery for things. There's a famous artist named Shepard Fairley. He did all the imagery for Obama. The famous Obama portrait that was like 2 different colors was created by that. So you saw the positivity that an artist can create create in society. So I think that because artists, musicians, actors have a voice, we should be using it for good. So yes. I think that it definitely shapes society at every level.
That's right.
I know, speaking just from me, is like I just try to do it in a positive way.
No, it really comes across. And so the fact that they've proven that art can add years to one's life. I mean,